we'll move on to something that we've been looking to do. It seems quite early to do this because it's, there's still 5 games left in the season, but the voting has been open for Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year, and Goal of the Season. So we're not going to do Goal of the Season because obviously we don't have highlights of the goals. It just doesn't work with podcast or visually with copyright. But we're going to do our Young Player of the Year, our Player of the Year, and our Transfer of the Year. That's what we're going to do separately. So as you all know, at this point in time, I'm not a data person. I'm a vibes person. So I'm going to be picking mines off vibes. James and Alan are going to be doing it a little bit more sensibly. So we'll start with Player of the Year. This one, I think there was a good few examples on the Celtic website for voting. Cal McGregor was one. Joe Hart was another. Cameron Carter-Vickers was one. Can't remember the other options that were given, but
McGregor, Furuhashi, Hart, Rogic, Jota.
There you go.
And Carter Vickers.
Yeah, so they're the options. Are you just going with one of those options, or are you just going to go with someone differently?
Yes. I am selecting one of those, yes.
Okay, who wants to go first?
Age before beauty, Alan. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just say a little bit about them all, just very quickly. I'm not going to go into huge detail and massive stat breakdown. I did set out trying to do an article on each of them and just ran out of time, so I don't think anyone noticed, so it's fine. McGregor, I think, what would I say about him? I think a lot of people probably would go with McGregor because of how impressive he's developed as a person, as a captain, as a leader of the squad, and I think that is true to say, and I think that he's definitely Ange's right-hand man on and off the pitch. He uses the same language. He has the same calm but assertive demeanour. He's growing into that role. His performances on the pitch, he's made for that sort of 6 role in that system. His defensive stats are actually improving year on year as well. So McGregor is definitely a big contender. Carter Vickers has come in. What I like about him is that, unlike others, he's not let the chaos sometimes that's been around him detract from his own performances. His own individual performances have been consistently very good, even when Starfelt was having early season, especially wobbles, when the fullbacks were changing every single week, when there was just a lack of structure and cohesion in front of him. His personal performances remain consistent. Kyogo, I think has been a spectacular signing. I think he's been the one who has almost. I think his importance is he gave the supporters belief that Postecoglou knew what he was doing, because he was the first Japanese signing. He was a player that clearly Ange knew. He cost a lot of money, and it was like, whoa, this guy's actually quite special. And he won the cup final pretty much on his own against Hibs. Hart, I think, Hart has been, what I would call him competence dressed up in a nice guy suit. lovely guy, brilliant personality, great person to have in the squad as an experienced pro. If you look at his data, he's been what I'd call competent, and I'm not trying to damn with faint praise. He broadly saves the amount of chances that he should, and that's it for me. And so I would say, yes, he's been very good in terms of he's doing his job very competently, but I wouldn't say he's been, he's overperforming as for example Craig Gordon has this season. Rogic, I think, is actually still shaping up to be his most productive season in terms of even minutes played. He's and hopefully output as well, but he's had a couple of breaks, mainly because of international duty actually. But again, if you look at his data, he's very inconsistent in terms of he's remembered for certain matches and specific moments, not for months of consistent high output. But this could still be Rogic's best season, even by the data. And then finally, Jota. Again, as I've said all season, a player who, by volume, is probably arguably the most productive player in the team. But when you look at his averages, then he's probably he's probably not that dissimilar to Abada. It's just that Abada's relatively quiet and does things in small volumes, and YPOTY does things in large volumes, and is a bit more of a flamboyant player in terms of his playing style. One's an introvert, one's an extrovert, if I can use that analogy. But I still think, although his form has dipped, his expected scoring contribution is down by about 0.1 every 90 minutes since he came back from injury. We shouldn't forget how exciting and thrilling he still can be, and I'm sure hopefully will be over the season. So there are my little summaries. To pick one, I'm going to go with Carter Vickers, and the reason I'm going with Carter Vickers is because here's a player who's never really settled in any team that he's played for. He's actually got a player who, although young for a centre-back, 23, he's got a lot of good experience, but he's played for about 6 different English Championship clubs. Now, English Championship isn't as high quality as some may realise, but it's a really tough league. It's just tough in terms of just the sheer physicality of it, the sheer volume of matches you have to play. Mm-hmm. And he'd established himself as being a first-team pick at all the clubs in the Championship, where they were at the top of the league, the bottom league, or in the middle. He's established himself in all of those. And I can see why, because he's incredibly consistent in his performances. And the fact that if I map him with all the other centre-backs, he's already up there in sort of, your Van Dijk, Julian, Ayer, Benkovic territory, even though it's his first season. And probably he's played more games this season than he's ever played. And as I say, because he's been that rock while there was all this chaos early season around him, and his personal performance didn't dip. I think for all those reasons, he's my overall choice.
Not a bad choice. Jim's, who is yours?
Well, I wish I could make this more exciting. But, I do things probably similar to Alan, but I'll explain briefly what my methodology was to come to the same conclusion, which was Carter Vickers. So I've kind of talked about this before, looking at, this comes from my background in business cycle analysis, but we call it the 3 Ps: persistence, pervasiveness, and pronounced. Right. So how persistent? Alan talked about his consistency, and I think that's reflected in his performance data. And I think, again, the eye test, I think most people would probably agree to that. Pervasiveness, when I look at his skill set across different facets of play, and this is where McGregor really falls off in his candidacy, so to speak, for me, is Carter Vickers has excellence across different facets of play, whether it's, what Alan might have in pack passing or his pack score relative to his peer group, but this season, but also relative to those historical figures at the club. So when I line him up relative to last season Ayer, for example, where Ayer was pretty good last season, even in the midst of the debacle, or Boyata in 18-19 when he was, had a pretty good season. Julian and Ayer in 18-19. Those I don't have the same depth of metrics and data that Alan does for Van Dijk, for example, or Denier going back that far. But what I have available, he benchmarks very well across these categories, these facets of play, including, unfortunately, wasn't followed through with on Sunday, finishing. He's been a good finisher as a center back. And that's the one area. So McGregor would be my second potential person, and where he falls off, and I've talked about this increasingly in the last 2 seasons, he's actually the worst midfielder in the league as far as shot OBV, right? So what value did he bring this season so far in the league? And he was 3rd worst player in all of the Europa League this season. So this is not like small sample size just in the league, for example. He also was really bad in decision-making and executing shots in the Europa League this season. So for me, someone at Celtic playing a midfield role to be the worst in SPFL level in a major category, a major performance metric, I find that a demerit that's too far of a bridge to cross for something which, again, this is to me an award that is obviously symbolic to a degree, but I think is important in the sense that it should really recognize excellence. And I think the depth and the breadth of Carter Vickers' excellence this season was, pretty much unmatched on the team. So that's why he's my pick.
Okay. On vibes, because that's important too, as well as stats. So
sort of weird Irish drug.
Just to let everyone know what vibes encapsulate. So you're talking, attitude, you're talking commitment, confidence.
What about
everything.
What about shithousery? Is that in there?
Shithousery is definitely part of it. All of the things that these guys can't measure. So, for example, Joe Hart, he's a nominee because, I mean, he brought this air of confidence, consistency throughout the season, just calmness as well is another word you could use for Joe Hart, and the sort of the upgrade that he brought in terms of that compared to who we had in that position definitely plays a role. Cal McGregor for me is definitely a nominee as well. Leadership, massively important this year when you're talking about new players coming in, and he brought that in spades, stepping up into that captaincy role, the likes of Kyogo coming in and just being, the guy that we needed, the talisman up front for the first half of the season. Then Giakoumakis stepping into that position as well, really important. So there's loads of players that I think could get it. I think you can't look beyond Cal McGregor in contrast to what you're saying, James, because if you look at the team between Joe Hart, Cameron Carter-Vickers, and Cal McGregor, I think that spine of the team has been the most important spine of the team throughout the season when it came to the changes and the development of the team and the ability for us to play. For example, if we still had Scott Brown there in that position and he was still getting that starting position ahead of Cal McGregor as the number 6, the balance just falls apart. And I think Cal McGregor is overall probably the best centre midfielder in Scotland based on just like pure centre midfield attributes, passing, the basics, passing, control, touch, vision, tackling, all that there. I think he encapsulates a really good old style centre midfielder that you needed in this season. So that's why I would make the argument that Cal McGregor is my player of the season.
I think he's a reasonable pick. So I wouldn't argue with that. I think that the one thing I'll say is I think that the captains get too much credit and too much blame is my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think in football in particular, they still have kind of a I don't know, an over sampling, let's call it, as far as their contribution to how teams perform.
Well, we're moving towards leadership groups in every aspect. I know Liverpool have them as well, and it's kind of
yeah. So it's better to build a team of good leaders than to potentially think you have just one monarch, so to speak. So Europeans and your monarchs.
I was just thinking about your approach there in terms of looking at different competency sets, and I completely I'm with you on that to an extent. But I just think that to back end up a little bit. So McGregor isn't actually that exceptional in a defensive sense as a defensive 6. He just isn't. I mean, even Beaton and McCarthy would be way above him under those metrics. But where he probably excels, I imagine, certainly in the Celtic squad, probably in the whole league, as being probably first is in what I'd call ball progression. So, and that's a mixture of either progressing the ball through passing or progressing the ball through running with the ball. And actually, if you think about the role that he's asked to play and how integral that is to the way that Postecoglou wants to play and the volume of how often he's on the ball, it's probably 75% of his performance in terms of on the ball actions, not off the ball, on the ball actions. So he excels at the thing that it's most important that he excels at, both for the team, and for the style of play. So whereas scoring goals is probably quite a small fraction of his responsibilities. So I completely agree with James, and it's astonishing that he was allowed to take penalties, given his natural finishing ability, if there is such a thing. Is clearly one of the worst in the whole league. So
yeah, and for me, it nudges Carter Vickers ahead, meaning that if he was just not great with the shooting, and again, I think I'd be curious what you have out. I think Y Scout has him at 64 shots. I think that's across competitive competitions. So again, it's not a negligible number. So he does it enough that I think it's a material aspect. Agreed that it's much smaller relative, particularly as he's played predominantly in that number 6 role. But it's the amplitude of how bad he's been to me that nudges it to Carter Vickers, right? So if he was just slightly bad, I probably would go with McGregor. But it's like, so bad.
I mean, the only one. Sorry, James. The only one who's got a worse expected goals per shot than McGregor in the squad is Hatate.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
We will move on to Young Player of the Year. So normally the cutoff point is 21, I believe, for Young Player of the Year, but Celtic don't have all that many young players in terms of that young. So I'm going to set our Young Player of the Year age at 23. So number 1 nomination is obviously Liam Scales coming in at left back. Then you've got
it's done. It's over.
You've got that's it. That's where it ends.
That's it.
Then you've got Anthony Ralston at right back. He's still 23. Jota, it brings him in to the mix. Then Karamoku Dembele didn't really play all that much because of his injury. Lila Bada, Mikey Johnson, anybody, or Johnny Kenny. So I think this is a fairly easy one.
Well, you've got O'Reilly's 21, Abada's 20, and Welsh is 22. So sorry, it's quite a long list actually.
Yeah, I was leaving off Welsh because I didn't think anybody was going to vote for him. But O'Reilly, yeah. So O'Reilly is another one I forgot.
Yeah. So if we're using those criteria, if that's the population set, then I think it comes down to, it's really 3: is Abada, Ralston, and Jota. That's a tough call between those 3. They've all kind of, I don't know. You go first, Alan.
I would, if I had to pick between those 3, I would actually pick Abada because he's got the better expected scoring contribution between him and Jota. Abada is actually 6 ahead of anyone else in terms of overall scoring contribution. He's got 6 more goals and assists than anyone else when you combine the 2 together. I think he's one of only 5 players of 21 and under in European leagues that's in double figures for goals and assists. And you're talking about, one of the other ones is Florian Wirtz that plays for Leverkusen, who's just sensational.
Insane. Yeah, he's incredible.
So I just wouldn't look any further than Abada personally on that basis. I've spoken about Jota. I do like him. As I say, his numbers, people probably don't believe his numbers are not as good as Abada's just because he gets on the ball so much in comparison.
And he's better looking.
Well, if that's what you like, but
genuinely, it plays a role. It definitely plays a role. He looks better as a player on the pitch.
Yeah, better hair for sure. But no, so I'm going to go for Abada. He's like a quiet assassin. I think he knows, he's got that little game intelligence. But as I say, don't underestimate how Abada's numbers are quite rare for a player of his age. And he came for relatively big money as well, so he's lived up to that, which I think is quite a lot of pressure for him to be under.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate just because we were the same on the other one. As I was sitting here thinking, and because I didn't think you were going to throw Jota and Ralston into this mix, so
technically it is cheating, but
right, you've thrown me a curveball here. So
because if you don't bring them in, you're
it's Abada. Yeah, it's
between Matt O'Reilly and Abada, and it's because it's not the full season.
Right. So I came prepared about talking about sample size, because longer term, I actually think that O'Reilly will be the better player. But for this season, between O'Reilly and Abada, I think it's a slam dunk. But now that you've thrown this curveball, and I was thinking a little bit and listening now, and I think there's a case to be made for Ralston because of again, the two of those P's, which is the persistence and pervasiveness. So again, I actually wrote about this when Juranovic came in for Ralston, and there's been I think Alan could speak to it a lot better than I can about the tweaks to the system with how Juranovic has played more inverted and hasn't overlapped as much. And I wrote about it. It's basically, it was a redistribution of creative output from winger to fullback and vice versa between Ralston and Juranovic when they played. But having said all of that, I mean, when Ralston played this season, his output was all three of those P's. He was right up there with Tavernier as far as creative output, total scoring contribution, excluding penalties, in fairness, because he doesn't take them and Tavernier does. And his ball carrying and his defensive metrics were also, consistently ranging from acceptable to good. And much to my surprise, he did pretty well when he played in Europa League. I thought that was likely to be where he would stumble badly if he was going to this season. And to his credit, I think overall he really showed himself to be, he didn't embarrass himself at that level. Let's put it that way. I thought he did a good job. And again, if I'm going to argue for Ralston over Abada, I would say he had more consistency on a relative basis. I mean, Abada absolutely, his total output was incredible, but probably a little lumpier, which again comes with the role of winger and his use rate, as Alan has pointed out, and I think that's continued depending on who's played on the right there to a degree. So I if I had to come up with an argument, that would be it.
Just on that, Ralston's actually played more minutes than the other two. He's played 3,412. Abada is 3,140, and Yota's 2,704. So if that
before Ralston got hurt in December, he was flogged. I mean, he was up there with like Turnbull as far as guys that just were playing a ton of minutes. So yeah, it's easy to forget that because he's kind of dropped off the picture a little bit in post break. But yeah, I mean, he put in such an incredible effort during those months. I think it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Anybody who's ever done a football summer camp will be familiar with the term most improved player, because it's usually what they give as the second award. If you were given a most improved player, it would be to Anthony Ralston. I don't think many people would argue with that. Final award. Oh, sorry, I didn't pick my pick. I go Abada just for the idea of him coming to the team, a young player from where he was coming from and being labeled the next Fed, and then seeing what he's done. He's been really incredible, and he's turned heads outside of Scotland as well. So he's my choice for Young Player of the Year. Final award is Transfer of the Year, Best Transfer. This is a long list because it was a rebuild, but we've got Kyogo, Starfelt, Abada is one of there, Juranovic is another, Giacomakis, Matt O'Reilly coming in January, Rio Hotate, Joe Hart, Itaguchi, Liam Scales, Ozad Uragide, Johnny Kenny, James McCarthy, Jota, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Daiza Maida, and I think that's some of the main ones. Liam Shaw is another one as well that came in. So we've got a lot of players coming in to the team, a lot of new faces in Celtic Park. I think everybody would have picked Kyogo if you asked them at Christmas. Is that still going to be the case?
So, first of all, I'll say I don't recall a window, and this is so, in terms of signing player of the season, whoever managed to get the value of money for money that I think we've got from some of these signings, and in particular, I'm thinking, to have Hart come in on half, effectively 50% of his previous salary for £1 million, it was great business. Even though there'll be no resale. Juranovic at 2.5 million is an absolute steal for a Croatian first choice, World Cup fullback, and the age that he's at as well. Hatate, about 1.5 million, I think will prove to be a great piece of business. Giacomakis for 2.5 million, I think will prove to be an absolute steal as well. Again, despite his age and a little bit. So some great value there. I think if we're talking about here and now, you would say Kyogo, because we spent a lot of money on him and he has delivered. But also, he's 26, 27 years old. So again, there's a lot of expectation. A club like Celtic needs a big striker. I don't mean a big striker. I mean a striker that stands up and plays under pressure and delivers under pressure. And I think he brought a style of play and a confidence. And I think like I said before, he almost validated Postecoglou to some extent and gave the fans confidence that this guy was going to do things differently, but we're going in the right direction. And Kyogo was the sort of pin-up boy of what this new approach was going to be. And I think that really helped everybody kind of get on side with the project. And he obviously made an immediate impact. And he won hearts and minds. And he won over the fact that he was that little bit older and the fact that he did cost a lot of money. So I think for the here and now, you would say that. But in terms of when we look back, I think we'll say that Matt O'Reilly for £1.5 million was just an astonishing piece of business. I do think we've got a generational talent of a player potentially in there. So longer term, if I can subvert, if you can cheat, I can do a Madden as well. I'll have a here and now Kyogo, and long term Matt O'Reilly.
James?
Yeah, I think for permanent signings, I don't know, did we limit it to permanent signings rather than loan signings too? But yeah, so if it's permanent signings, I would agree with Alan, actually. I think Kyogo, I'm not sure what his resale potential is going to be. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I agree. I mean, I think that the transfer that kind of fits the broader profile of what we could dream of with a fully functioning football operations department and smart ownership would be Matt O'Reilly. He fits the age demographic, probably on the high end of the age demographic, but he fits it. And I think he's not only produced at a really high level, obviously for a relatively short period of time, but I'm going to go off the board here. Maybe surprisingly, which is, you see certain things that add that intangible aspect to people. And obviously, as outsiders, we don't know the dressing room personality, the work ethic, those kind of things that I think are vitally important, but something as outsiders we can have no idea. But that, things like the fact that he took less money and he took the path that he did.
Damn it, you took mine.
Yeah, the career path, I think that speaks to a certain maturity and judgment. And, qualitatively, when you see him do certain things on the pitch with the vision, the decision-making, we talk about maybe to the detriment of some other players like Jota, that the fact that he made the decision with his career that he did correlates with the fact that he's really smart on the pitch too, and he makes really smart decisions playing. And then you see the physical aspects that, things like him bringing that ball down. They joked on the live broadcast about the flexibility of Sutton not being there anymore to be able to do it. I mean, it's that kind of just, specialness that you see that, I think that confluence Alan's. I mean, he could be the one that goes for, 10 times what we paid for him, or 15 times or 20 times. So I think he's the one that could be that dial mover, not only on a performance basis the next couple of years, but also with the big potential return on investment. So that he's my clear pick.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were going somewhere else there. So
No.
I thought you were going to steal mine. So thank you for not stealing mine. I'm going to go with someone, like you say, about the intangibles and the decision to come to the club at this point in his career and what happened now that we know that it's out in the open. And that's Joe Hart, who was told by Nuno Espirito Santo at Tottenham that he wasn't quick enough, he wasn't good enough on his feet to be a top-level goalkeeper anymore. And Nuno got sacked a couple of months later. Joe Hart came up to Celtic. He took a massive wage cut to do so. We know now that it was an Ange decision for him to come up. It wasn't some board member who made a random decision to pick Joe Hart out. And I just think, although long-term, 5 years' time, Joe Hart's not going to be the goalkeeper or the type of goalkeeper that we had, but I think it was the type of goalkeeper that we needed this season to just don't concede. Like Alan said, he didn't exceed expectations. He's not doing a Forster on it. He's not saving shots that we think, oh my God, I can't believe he saved that. He's saving the shots that we think he should. He's preventing the goals that we think he should. And added to that, he is a leader within the dressing room. He's won a Premier League. He's mature. And with a group coming in, the volume of players that have come in, first of all, but also the age with Abada, even Hatate, players coming in from abroad, settling into the team. I think he has been a massive figure. So Joe Hart is my transfer of the year just because of how much he cost and the impact he made in the position that he came into. So Joe Hart and then 2 Matt O'Reillys. I do go with you long term on Matt O'Reilly, though. I think he's going to be unbelievable, like incredible that we got this guy, in fairness, at this point in his career. So long term, I think he's going to be my favorite player at Celtic for a long time. So that is our player of the year, young player of the year, and transfer of the year. So we've got Cameron Carter-Vickers, we've got Callum McGregor. Both of you went for Cameron Carter-Vickers. Young player of the year, 2 votes for Abada, 1 for Ralston, but I did bend the rules to allow Ralston to be in that. So technically it would be 3 Abadas if it wasn't the bent rules. And then we've got Joe Hart, and 2 Matt O'Reillys for transfer of the year. So anything else that we want to touch on in this session?
No,
I think we're good.
Yeah, we'll do a moment of the season. We'll do an overarching theme of the season once we're past these post-split games as well. So 5 games to go in the season now. Celtic 6 points clear. Ross County is up first. We did do a preview, and we will be previewing all these games separately to the Huddle Breakdown on the Breakdowning YouTube channel. We did it with Tino from the Celtic Exchange. So basically, we're going to be joined by loads of different pods from across the world, Celtic podcasters, to preview all these games separately to the Huddle Breakdown. So if you want to get them, you can subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified when they go live.